Get the whole story.
Well, a good morning to you. Welcome to the broadcast. It is the 13th day of January 2022. Thank you so much, and you're right on time. You're watching Morning Prime, and we're here to inform you about some of the top stories that are being covered on today's dailies. We'll definitely get to review the papers, even as later on we'll get to highlight the gender agenda right here on Morning Prime. So much to talk about, so little time. My name is Jesse Rogers. Thank you for joining us once again. Perhaps let me just highlight what you can expect on the front page of today's dailies. Kenya's bold newspaper, The Standard. And this is the headline, even as the deadline for those public officers who want to vie in the 2022 general election. February 9th is the deadline, despite there being a court order, which suspended the deadline, by the way, but it hasn't stopped some of the public officers from stepping down. Most recently, George Natembeya, the outgoing Rift Valley Regional Commissioner, has just exited. He announced his resignation just yesterday, and he's plunged into elective politics, and he's aiming for the Trans Nzoia gubernatorial seat. Interesting times right now, and that's on the front page. As you can see, although the official quit date for state officers joining politics is 3 weeks away, more big names are expected to follow in the footsteps of Natembeya, who resigned. Page 10 and 11 sort of break down some of those cabinet secretaries, PSs, CASs, and public officers who are eyeing various elective seats in the country come August 9th. But bear in mind, the court just recently suspended that particular deadline and is set to issue a directive on January 24th. But of course, a lot more resignations are set to happen, and some of the big names have been highlighted there. We have CS Charles Keter, most recently was involved in a political tour by Deputy President William Ruto, CAS Patrick Ntutu, and most notably CAS Ababu Namwamba, equally PS Hamadi Boga and CS Ukuri Yatani, as well as Simon Chelugui, who's the cabinet secretary. So much to talk about when it comes to that, bearing in mind some of the challenges that might face President Uhuru Kenyatta. Will he continue with half of his cabinet, or will he appoint people to fill those positions once these individuals step down in order to seek those elective seats? So that's definitely one of the key issues we'll be talking about, including the competency of those replacements, if it will happen. So that's one of the major stories on The Standard. But equally, you have there on the left side, on the national segment, the unrest in schools and how the Cabinet Secretary for Education, Professor George Magoha, has pledged more approved schools in order to tame school unrest in the country, where the minister says 99% of the boarding schools are well run, and he's blamed school unrest on truancy and promises to deal with the vice. Interesting times we're living, even as the Cabinet Secretary on page 14 differed with education stakeholders' calls for corporal punishment to be reinstated in schools. He's observed that some schools have no cases of indiscipline, and it would be unfair to categorize them with those having indiscipline cases. One of the stories covered, but at the top right there, on the national page 13, experts are warning about the good and bad news of the Omicron variant, where just recently scientists in Cyprus have reported a new COVID-19 variant, better known as Deltacron, which has elements of both Delta and Omicron. Even though reports are speculative, the World Health Organization just yesterday, through one of its members, sort of put skepticism around the Delta and Omicron variant, better known as Deltacron, mentioning that a super variant hasn't formed. So we'll continue monitoring the health circles, at least find out what is this Delta variant, the Delta Omicron variant. Other stories on the business page: relievers court halts hike in insurance cost, even as just yesterday, the Cup of Nations, we saw interesting developments. The referees were actually put on the spot for finishing a controversial Group F match even before the full time, where Mali beat Tunisia 1-0. That and other stories in regards to the African Cup of Nations tournament currently ongoing on pages 54 through to 56. Well, briefly, that's what has been covered on The Standard. Perhaps you can just cross over to the Daily Nation as I highlight what's on the front page. And the Daily Nation is going big with a political headline in terms of what is expected to happen today. And here you have it: Uhuru invites Azimio members of parliament to election talks, where just today, President Uhuru Kenyatta is set to host lawmakers supporting his handshake deal with ODM chief Raila Odinga at a State House meeting in which he's expected to give direction on his succession. Now, Mr. Odinga and One Kenya Alliance principals Kalonzo Musyoka, Musalia Mudavadi, Moses Wetangula, and Gideon Moi have also been invited. Well, there are many developments happening in the political scene. We'll definitely highlight whether any developments come from this particular meeting in terms of succession politics. But ODM chief Raila Odinga and Oka principals have also been invited, even as we anticipate Raila to launch the nationwide campaign rallies in Kiambu, specifically Thika, this Saturday. And remember, this weekend, a lot of meetings happening. Equally, the Wiper leader Kalonzo Musyoka will be meeting Wiper delegates and leaders from the Lower Eastern region at his home. And this comes in the backdrop of 3 governors meeting just yesterday and throwing water to the presidential ambitions of Wiper leader Kalonzo Musyoka. So those are some of the political developments covered on the front page of the Daily Nation. Equally, they highlight the shame of sham hate speech prosecutions as culprits continue walking free. Remember, ever since the promulgation of the 2010 Constitution, we haven't had a successful conviction in terms of those who have been found making hate speech utterances. And just recently, we've seen the clamor around investigations by the DPP and the NCIC as well. But prosecutions remain a piped dream. We'll definitely get to highlight that with my panel a little bit later on. But interestingly, the Deputy President was touring Nairobi County. He was in Eastleigh just yesterday, and he promised the city youth a couple of things in his tour. It's been highlighted on page 5 of the Daily Nation. Still going with the 5 billion fund for city traders and his alleged imperial rule. There's a plot on that. More details on page 5. Find out more about the political inroads by the Deputy President. The AFCON debacle has also been covered right there as the match ended before 90 minutes, as I mentioned. Page 3, 50, and 51 of the Daily Nation cover that. But interestingly, I don't know if you had lights yesterday evening, because various parts of the country were affected with the lights issue. Of course, we had a couple of pylons going down right here in Imara Daima, just next here in Mombasa Road. And the authorities have definitely come out, and most fingers are pointed towards vandalism. But it definitely raises questions to the inspection and how constant the inspections are done in this particular site, and whether they're done by qualified personnel. That story has been covered on the back page of the Daily Nation, as the DCI has launched a probe into the nationwide power outage in the country, where even as of yesterday, some parts of the country, including Kilimani, Embakasi, and Langata as well, were without lights due to this particular challenge that was orchestrated most recently. Page 4 of the Standard as well covers what you need to know about what residents had and saw when the power lines collapsed. So a lot more stories are definitely developing in the course of the day, and we'll definitely follow up on them for you right here on KTN News. But that's on the local scene. Perhaps let's cross over to the international scene, just briefly peruse some of the international pages. so you can be adequately informed about some of the news making headlines. Perhaps if you can begin with the Daily Monitor, the latest from Uganda. It should be on your screens shortly. There you have it, one of the major stories covered. Okay, apologies for that. Let's just go back. Okay, there we have it, the Daily Monitor. South African indigenous king arrested for growing cannabis at presidency. Well, that's an interesting turn of events right there, where the leader was actually arrested. Find out more on those details. Other developments happening still in Uganda and around the world. We have bombed ADF seriously, says one of the major generals right there, Kayanja, even as attackers used Uganda-Congo army fatigues to raid DRC villages. Other stories covered on the Daily Monitor page. The government moves to lock out unvaccinated public servants, where they're definitely putting their foot down. Get this, over the last 2 weeks, cases of new infections have gone up with more than 50 people dead. And it seems the government is reeling in on those who are unvaccinated, especially public servants. More details on that particular article. Perhaps let's cross over to yet another page. The Citizen, the latest from Tanzania. Why buying a house in Tanzania costs more now? Where house building in Tanzania has become more expensive following the rise in cost of construction materials, all due to the impact of COVID-19 that has disrupted production and cost freight charges. More details on how the building sector is reeling from the increase in prices. Kenyan textile company eyes Zanzibar export market. Find out which company that is. Kenyan Somali to be released from Guantanamo Bay. He was actually dramatically arrested in 2006. He's been held since 2006, where he was arrested in Mombasa and taken there due to links with Al-Qaeda and the 2002 bombings that happened. Do Kabudi and Lukuvi's new roles clash with the constitution? Find out more about that particular issue, even as Zanzibar has marked 58 years of revolution with focus on blue economy. That's the latest from Tanzania. Over to Rwanda today. Just briefly, let's interrogate some of the headlines. Domestic workers had hit a new COVID-19 wave, where domestic workers by nature of their work interact with COVID-19 patients while on duty, and that has definitely caused their work to be impacted negatively rather. Ndayishimiye sends envoy to Rwanda. The two countries have had strained relations since 2015, raising hope of restoring ties. Find out more about the bilateral ties between these two countries. Millions more locked down as China battles the Omicron spread, where 5 million residents in that particular city started home confinement rather recently, even as ECOWAS cuts Mali off over a military coup. That's the latest covered on the Citizen, or Rwanda Today rather. Let's cross over to CNN International, the latest on the world news. Trump comes to terms with his grip on the GOP party, where the former president is facing weak support among Republicans for his calls to depose Mitch McConnell. Find out more in terms of the issues facing the Republican Party 1 day after Quebec introduced unvaxxed tax. Fast dose appointments have actually spiked in the country. Well, I didn't know there's an unvaccinated tax. That's news right there. Find out more on how it's actually been rolled out. And Vital Klitschko sends warning to Russia over troops near Ukraine border. The former boxer definitely giving his voice into the political developments happening in Ukraine and sending a warning shot to Russia. Those are some of the international stories making headlines across the various pages. Just make sure you're adequately informed about the latest news making headlines. Okay, so let's come back locally and perhaps touch on a story that affected you, perhaps in your house, your office, or your business premises. And this is all because of the second day running, a power outage has affected parts of Nairobi and Machakos counties, where just yesterday Kenya Power said the blackout was caused by a sustained fault on the Suswa-Embakasi power transmission line. The Wednesday outage followed a countrywide blackout on Tuesday. But just what could have led to the collapse of 4 towers at the Kiambere-Embakasi high-voltage power line on Tuesday, leaving the country without power? Rita Tinina with that report.
On the ground in Natembeya, experts on Wednesday busy at work trying to repair the damage following the collapse of 4 pylons on the Kiambere-Embakasi high-voltage power line on Tuesday.
Sasa moja ilipoanguka ikafanya zingine zote zikaanguka.
The collapse led to a countrywide power outage. Kenya Power had by Tuesday evening managed to restore power to most of the affected parts of the country, except Garissa, Mwingi and Kitui. But many questions remain unanswered.
We are investigating the cause of what made the towers to collapse.
On the ground, locals have their own explanations.
So towers zimefunguliwa nati kutoka chini.
Pale chini imekosa kustahimili ule uzito. Maana chuma zile za supporter ni kama zimetolewa.
And even experts are pointing to the same thing.
There are people who remove parts of the towers. Unfortunately, they don't know to what extent that the tower will keep standing as they continue removing these parts, because there is ready market for scrap metal. People are tempted to remove pieces and parts of that tower and sell them.
Engineer Nathaniel Matalanga, the president of the Institution of Engineers of Kenya, says the pylons are built with the factor of safety, but with vandalism, they can only withstand the interference for so long.
When maybe the first bracing is removed because of the factor of safety, the pylon keeps standing. Then it's the second, the third, but they reach a time when now you have removed a lot more than the factor of safety can take. And then the collapse like this happens. The cables are in tension. So when one of them comes down, it pulls the other ones that is attached to. And that's why the initial collapse, and then you can see the second, third, can even go to the fourth.
It is not the first time that pylons are collapsing. To Engineer Matalanga, constant inspection is crucial, and qualified professionals make all the difference.
During the inspection, if you are properly qualified, you are able to tell that the situation has changed, and therefore you are able to repair it. But if you don't have the requisite training, then of course you will not be able to tell until a collapse has happened. So it will be good that these agencies, Kenya Power and in this case Ketraco, they are properly resourced and the competent staff is employed.
And in the long run, he says, it may take drastic measures by the government.
Stop scrap metal dealers. I know efforts have been made, but now there are also scrap metal dealers, organizations that can, lobby groups that come up and say, no, this is our livelihood, this is how we are earning. We're employing so many people, so you cannot just stop us. But we should look at the benefit against the losses.
The Kiambere-Embakasi high-voltage power line is just one headache for Kenya Power and the Kenya Electricity Transmission Company. As a result of what Kenya Power termed as a sustained fault on the Suswa-Embakasi power transmission line, Athi River, Syokimau, Kitengela, Mlolongo, Embakasi, Kilimani, Halingam, and the Nairobi Central Business District were without power from Tuesday night. Wednesday morning, an industrial area, parts of Langata, Jamhuri, Kileleshwa and Westlands joined the list of areas without power. The power outage on Tuesday and Wednesday saw businesses record huge losses. In Natembeya, Stevens High School students will be home for a while after power lines landed on the school. And worshippers at the Worldwide Gospel Church of Kenya will be hoping that engineers will sort out things on the ground soon if they are to have a place to worship. Rita Tinina, KTN News.
Well, as Rita Tinina has just broken down, the initial inquiry sort of points towards vandalism by scrap metal dealers. But as I mentioned, the DCI has picked that investigation and they haven't ruled out the element of sabotage. We'll definitely inform you even as we take a look at yet another big story, and it's been focused on the front page of the Standard. The long-serving administrator who until yesterday was Rift Valley Regional Commissioner George Natembeya has resigned. Natembeya, who has spent the last 2 of his 26 years in public service as a regional commissioner for the expansive Rift Valley region, is eyeing an elective seat in the coming general election. Natembeya has focused his eyes on the Trans Nzoia seat, where he's seeking to succeed Governor Patrick Khaemba, who will be exiting at the end of his second term as the county's boss. The administrator is among high-ranking civil servants who will be entering the turbulent sea that is Kenyan politics. Ibrahim Karanja with that report.
26 years stint as an administrator traversing various parts of the country, George Natembeya made his final salute as the Rift Valley Regional Commissioner Wednesday. Natembeya taking the time to outline his experience right from when he was a district officer and rising through the ranks to regional commissioner.
Hatungefaulu ile kazi ambayo tumefanya kama wangekuwa ni wazembe. Hao maofisa ambao wako hapa, kila mmoja wao amejukumika sana.
Natembeya, who will be seeking to succeed Governor Patrick Khaemba and become the second governor for Trans Nzoia County, will square it out with other political heavyweights, among them Kiminini Member of Parliament, who is Ford Kenya's Secretary General Chris Wamalwa, woman Representative Janet Nangabo, businessman Moses Haoya, and Philemon Samoei. But it is Chris Wamalwa who has openly clashed with Natembeya in recent days.
So wala ambao walikuwa nasema Natembeya atoa uniform, Natembeya ametoa uniform na anakuja kimeumana.
Though he remained tight-lipped over his choice of a political party, the former regional boss already has an invitation from the DAPK.
Si ametangaza Rift Valley? Ako njiani anakuja, amenipigia simu anasema he's on his way. Mko tayari kumpokea?
We will work together with him to see that he realizes his goals of becoming the governor of Trans Nzoia.
Natembeya's first day as a politician, however, started with a hit as he received a political slap from unlikely quarters. Tiati Member of Parliament William Kamket.
His strong arm tactics have had worse effects to the people than if he had chosen other tactics.
Kamket, who has had run-ins with Natembeya in the past, promising a grueling political battle.
Alikuwa anatuwekelea kwamba mbuzi ikiibiwa pale, ng'ombe ikiibiwa pale ni Kamket ama sijui ni mwingine. Sasa kuku ikiibiwa Kitale ni yeye. Miwa ikiibiwa Kitale ni yeye. Mtu akipika bibi yake ni yeye.
If he becomes successful, Natembeya will join a list of past administrators, including the late Simeon Nyachae, the late Muhammad Yusuf Haji, and David Musila, who quit civil service to join politics. Meanwhile, Wednesday's development marked the start of expected high-profile resignations as public servants seek to capture elective positions. Among those expected to bow out in the coming weeks include Cabinet Secretaries Charles Ketero of Devolution and Cecily Kariuki of Water, who have shown interest in seeking elective seats. CAS's Lawrence Karanja, John Mosonik and Patrick Ntutu will seek the positions of Senator Nakuru, Bomet Governor and Narok Governor respectively. Another CAS, Ababu Namwamba, has also shown interest in recapturing his former position of Budalangi Member of Parliament. Others are PSS Fred Segor, who is targeting Baringo to be governor, Joseph Irungu Wairago targeting Muranga to be governor, and Hamadi Boga targeting to be the governor for Kwale County. Their anticipated resignations, however, could be waiting for a direction by the Employment and Labor Relations Court, expected to give directions on a petition challenging the law requiring civil servants to resign by February 9th, 2022. The directive will be issued on the 24th of January, 2022. Ibrahim Karanja, KTN News.
Okay, well, it seems not every public officer is waiting for the courts to pronounce themselves on that particular matter or when it comes to resignation. They will pronounce themselves on January 24th, but we're still waiting on that. But the front page of the Standard, as I highlighted, has broken down some of the big names that are interested in the political positions, elective political positions come August 9th. And with the February 9th deadline, their time is running out. So we expect the season of resignations to begin. But that leaves the president in a dilemma whether to replace those who are stepping down, those who will quit to work with him in his cabinet, or should he continue just like that? Equally, that same dilemma is being replicated across the 47 counties where governors will have to interrogate whether to replace those in the administration who will step down in order to vie for elective seats. We'll start with that particular discussion. Allow me to introduce my guests in studio. It's the first time I'm seeing them this particular year. So I'll start with Happy New Year salutations. I'm joined right here in studio by Prof, ex-Iraqi economist. It's great to have you with us. Good morning.
Good morning, how are you?
Very fine, thank you. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you.
Thank
and
you
all
for
the
making
Kenyans.
time. What?
And to all Kenyans.
Oh, and to all Kenyans as well. Very important to pass your salutations as well. Let's cross over to the other side of the studio. Martin Zowino joins me as well, Member of Parliament, Diwa constituency. It's great to have you with us, Wood Chief. How are you doing?
All right, Rogers, thank you so much, and it's good to see you. Good morning, Kenyans.
Always a pleasure. And last but definitely not least, Sakwa Bunyasi, Member of Parliament, Nambale constituency. Happy New Year, sir.
Thank you, Jesse. Good to see you again.
Okay, let me start with ex-Iraqi. I don't know if you harbor any political interests, and perhaps that's why I started with you. Well, what's your take on the men who are standing down, top-notch, big names rather, in terms of Uhuru's cabinet, who might be stepping down in a few? And it definitely leaves President Uhuru Kenyatta with a dilemma of sorts in one or the other, whether to replace those who are stepping down or not, especially in key government positions. Like the Treasury, Ukur Yatani sort of hinted towards vying as well. What say you about it?
Good morning, and let me start by protesting that you always put me in between two politicians. So for the two colleagues I am with live on studio today, I'm sure they have political ambitions. I don't have for now, but if, as politicians put it, if you are called upon to serve a good political position, I might reconsider that, but not in the next 10 years. I think the president has a big dilemma. When people in the big positions leave office, they leave vacancies. But what I know is that in government, there's very good succession plan. So at the end of the day, there are people who are going to take the positions they have been taking, either in acting capacity or such. So I think the president is not in a very big dilemma. Number two, it is not unexpected, it's in the law. It is known that if you are going to take an elective position, you need to resign 6 months before we go to the post. Whether it is in the counties, whether it is in the national government, I think there are very good successive plans. There are very good plans on who will take over if so-and-so leaves. So I don't think it's a big dilemma. And I think it's a good law in my opinion, because if you go to the polls, or if you're in the government position, a few days before we go to the polls, then you have a lot of insider's knowledge. We give you a lot of competitive advantage. So I think it's a good idea. The question is who is going to leave. I'm sure as we approach the end of February, you're going to see people leaving, more people leaving. I don't know who they are, but I think it's going to be a moment of political excitement, in my opinion.
Okay, that's interesting. And some of these individuals might be your competitors. Sakwa Bunyasi, with you, what's your reaction to this, even as we await for the court to pronounce itself on the matter on January 24th?
I think it's fair that it should happen quite early, even earlier than that. Our roles are not such as you can combine with any other function, and even the transition up to it normally is difficult to maintain a non-biased approach. So I think it's fair.
That's really proper. And what's your take, still with you, Sakwa, on the cabinet secretaries who, despite not having resigned, are still being engaged in active politics, and they've paid allegiance to certain factions? Do you have any issue with that?
A big issue, I have the Interior Secretary in mind, for example, and others. I think in his role, partisanship is destabilizing, politically destabilizing. I think that politicians who have ambitions to run should step aside early enough. There's no shortage of Kenyans who can carry on those responsibilities. I know it may be difficult to separate at certain moments because you are loyal to your boss and you are in between things you are doing, but the partisanship is extremely destabilizing and those need to move out much earlier. It should have been a year in advance, perhaps.
Okay, that's really proper. Martins, as we cross over to you, is it partisanship or you're just bowing to the whims of the appointing authority, even as you add your voice to the dilemma facing Uhuru and the county governors as well?
Thank you, Rogers. First of all, I want to assure the professor that politicians are also professionals, so you're not between hyenas. It's okay. But I want to thank Natembeya. You know, it needs this kind of bold step. When you are playing for this team and you want to transit to another team, you take off the jersey because civil service is a career, and you can't dwell up, you know, the two. Once you feel I've done enough here and I want to go to the other side, the best and honorable thing to do is to resign the way he has done. And I really want others to do the same. It's not a crisis on the president because the ministries are well structured and managed. But what we want these people to do is to do Kenyans a favor. That when you are going out, please let it be known earlier. Don't wait for the courts to pronounce themselves on this. It's a call that you need to make and not to be pushed through or to wait until you see you are safe to do that. Then that means you can be defined so early by other politicians.
Be proper. And back to you, XN. Do you think this will perhaps hit the steps taken to solidify President Uhuru Kenyatta's legacy? Because if he's to bring in new cabinet secretaries for the short remaining period, it has to be competent people who actually still see the vision that the president outlined for the nation. What's your take on that?
I don't think I'll be worried about the vision because a vision is always long term. So what the president has done with Big Four and his other agenda should go beyond his cabinet. It should go beyond his term. It should be something we can remember 50 years from now. So even if certain PSs, even if certain MPs, even if certain CSs leave their position, the vision should remain. The project should remain. So I don't think that's a bad I don't think that is a crisis in my opinion, because there are other people over the CSs. There are other people over the PSs, the civil service and so on, who would be taking care of those projects. So if the project was well defined over a long period of time, I don't think that's a crisis. It should continue beyond even the presidency itself. So even if he leaves office, whoever takes after him at the end in August, he would continue from where he started, because those are not his projects. They are national projects. They are projects for the people of this country. So they should continue whether PSs, whether CSs leave or not.
Okay, that's definitely well noted. Sakwa, I don't know if you had interacted previously with the man who has orchestrated or started the wave of resignations, the outgoing Rift Valley Regional Commissioner, George Natembeya, was definitely a tough regional administrator, at least according to his colleagues. But he's not the first administrator who's quit civil service to join politics. We have the likes of Nyachae back in the days who did the same. What's your take?
I only know of Natembeya. I may have met him maybe once or twice. We really don't know each other at all, I think. I only know him in his official capacity.
Okay.
And Rift Valley, being a large, diverse region, has always had a very tough PCs, as I would say, right from independence. I guess by the time somebody is selected to go there, is already perceived as being one who can confront the challenges of a region as diverse as the Turkana region down to areas bordering Taita Taveta. You see, it's a big chunk of Kenya. So clearly, they don't take softies there. That is hard. He seems to have cut out his image as a no-nonsense administrator. Way beyond, so to say, the proverbial sense, his body size. So he's much bigger than life, you'd say. So, but in terms of quitting to go for elective post, I think he is only one in a long string of people who have done that. People have, you mentioned some earlier on, former PCs who resigned and went into politics, and I wish him luck in politics. A different ball game. He's been used to talking to, sometimes talking down to, ordering and reorganizing by virtue of his authority. Now he'll be questioned by the barefooted voters. It can be a humbling experience, completely unrelated to the nature of work that he was doing. So let's see how that goes, and I do hope that in all of that he has a clear development agenda for Trans Nzoia. Trans Nzoia is a breadbasket for Kenya. It has a lot of challenges, development challenges, so I do hope that as he's looked around and been there in and out, he'll be able to provide some leadership on that one. Thank you.
Okay, that's well noted. As I cross over to you, Martins, I mean, this won't be the first individual who's transiting perhaps from administration functions or even from the corporate world into politics. And as you well know, some of the people mentioned, politics is quite murky. So what advice, perhaps on a light note, would you give some of these individuals who are entering politics for the first time and they're not used to the political space in the country, which is survival for the fittest? You know, what say you?
It's true. They say politics is dirty, yes, but in every situation, in every dirty water, you need people who can also bring sanitation. So what I can advise Natembeya is just make sure you get to the right party. And I would invite you to Azimio la Umoja. That is the way people are going. But it's okay. It's a different change from where you are sitting and seeing people below. But I have to quickly say, being a son of a chief, I know how they relate also to the people, up to the county commissioners. They do have barasas, they do have people's meeting, and if we can master that and be in a rally where if somebody says something which is not palatable, you can still stomach and smile and say, okay, what do you mean by that? And try to get solutions from the people themselves as you champion their interest. I think that's the way to go. Having been in administration that long, I think it will just do fine, but it depends on the rail he's taking.
Okay, well, we'll definitely see what develops right after. Well, some indications pointed towards the Democratic Action Party of Kenya, but we'll definitely wait to see from the man himself. Exeni Raki, let's talk about power matters. I don't know if you're affected by the electricity outage that was there in most parts of the country, and some parts were affected as late as yesterday, including Nairobi CBD, Westlands, Kilimani, parts of Lang'ata as well. And initial investigations sort of point towards vandalism, and that definitely brings into the picture the issues to do with constant inspection by qualified personnel from the relevant authorities, be it Kenya Power, Ketraco, and whatnot. What say you about vandalism and how we can actually put a stop to this? It's not the first time that we've had power issues in the country in the near past.
Before I respond to your question, let me comment about Natembeya.
Okay.
Because by being in the headlines,
yes,
this long-serving civil servant has taken advantage of first-mover advantage. He's now in the headlines. Everybody's talking about him. So by resigning before the others, he's actually getting free publicity. And I think that was a smart move. On blackout, I was a victim yesterday. I was a victim before yesterday. The day before yesterday, I had to go looking for a hotel that had a generator so that I can do some critical work. And it is very annoying when we have a power blackout, when COVID has forced us to work from home. So you're working from home, you have no power. And I think that's the context we should look at that blackout. It affected a lot of people. And I don't know what the problem is, because power lines are a critical national infrastructure. So we don't expect to hear of something like sabotage. If you look at the critical power systems, they are supposed to be constantly maintained, whether it is pylons, whether it's generators, whether it is dams. We are supposed to focus on preventive maintenance. We don't end up fixing a pylon or a generator or a transmission line because something has gone wrong. We should always service them the way we service our cars. You don't wait for your car to stop somewhere on the side of the road so that you know it needs service. You don't need to wait until you get sick so that we take you to the hospital. You can go for a checkup. So the same way we should do with our power transmission lines. And as a consumer, I don't know what Ketraco does. I don't know what Kenya Power does. All I want is my power, and I pay for it when it is due. So I think somebody should take responsibility for giving us a blackout for 2 days. And it is a time we know who that is. And the person takes responsibility, and we get our power. We have become such a developed country, so dependent on power, that we cannot afford to go for a few hours without power. It was wrong, and it should not happen again.
It's definitely wrong. The DCI has launched a probe into that nationwide power outage, even as there are a couple of questions being raised about disaster preparedness and the backup systems at the corporation, which should have, in one way or the other, kicked in to provide consumers an alternative. Speaking of lack of alternatives, we well know we're dealing with a monopoly, Sakwa Bunyasi. Well, what say you about the electricity distribution firm and perhaps some of the issues that have faced Kenya Power in the recent past?
Just, I don't have kind words for those institutions.
Yeah.
But let me start by saying that I am a little uncomfortable with the speculation out there to say maybe this was sabotage, maybe this was something else. These are critical systems, as my colleague has just said, and they're engineering setups. Engineering setups are not so difficult to track back where the problem originated from. So they better do that very quickly and allay fears in the country, because if not, they are trying to identify soft spots in the country, and then we can get a real sabotage given the region where we live and so on. I really would hope that they would clear it as quickly as possible. Secondly, the distribution company, I guess that would be the one that is responsible for that critical infrastructure, must be, accountability is too soft a word. I think they must be called out, and somebody should quit his job. This is too costly, too risky, and too careless if it was a maintenance question. I think we need to go in with a tough stance and not sort of, so to say, oh, maybe this, maybe that, and maybe so and so. They can pin that down. That's how these critical engineering systems work. They're not like human systems. They're not like social systems. That would be a lot more complex to go and pin down. This they must pin down. The cost to the economy is high, but the potential risk is even higher if people realize that that is a soft spot.
That's proper. And let's talk about those power prices, which has been a sore issue right here, Martins, even as you add your voice to perhaps the vandalism claims. And maybe Kenyans will finally see the long road in terms of the promises that were handed by the Jubilee administration almost 10 years ago. This promise has been 10 years in the making, because just recently we saw the gazettement of new electricity tariffs, and this is expected to take electricity prices down an initial 15%. This is good news to business owners, to homes as well. What's your view on that?
Which we are waiting for, Rogers, very, very keenly, because that will reduce the prices of so many things. But that said, we are sick and tired, Rogers, by this reactionary management of very important institutions. Monopoly is one thing that we have to deal with, whether we like it or not. That is where the global kind of business is going. You cannot trust one person or one company or two with the huge installations like powers that controls the economy of this country. What happened the 2 days, the blackout, is yet to be actually realized. We don't know how it affected the health facilities, where people still depend on ventilators, how that went. Economies, small business people who depend on this, we don't know. So this, to me, Rogers, if I want to put it plainly, have to do with contracting issues. It's not only this big installation we see coming down, but even poles in rural settings. Is raised today, tomorrow is down. The type of contractors that are engaged in these installations are not properly vetted. That's point number one. Number two, everything has gone digital. Even if an installation of that magnitude is being vandalized, it should be censored, sent somewhere that things are going wrong here. How about the daily inspection or weekly inspection? What happened to the inspectors? So you wait until something tumbles down, and then you say, there's power blackout. No, I think there's something wrong. And to clean it up, one, we have to consider franchising power in this country. Two, if there is no digital supervision, it should be installed immediately. So even if an installation of that magnitude is being vandalized, you can see from the screen something happening. They have to be protected. Where are the protection lines? So what we are telling the power people, we don't want this reactionary management. It does not do good to any Kenyan. And it was very unfortunate that happened.
Exactly. The buck must stop with someone. But let's see how the investigations turn out. And since we're talking about reliable power, and not just reliable power, at affordable rates as well. Exen Iraqi, I am sure you're well versed with power purchase agreements because it's been a long way coming, and we've seen talk of how this power purchase agreements between independent power producers and Kenya Power should be pegged on performance to ensure that we have access to power at a proper cost. About the journey so far, this promise has been 10 years in the making. Are you okay with some of the changes that have been made at Kenya Power, even at the Ministry of Energy as well? Well, what say you about that?
I think before we go to that, everybody is talking about what could have happened for the pylons and the transmission lines to fall.
Yeah.
And I think a few months ago, I remember hearing KenGen, the sister company to Kenya Power, saying that they are using drones to inspect dams and so on. And I don't see why Kenya Power cannot do the same. Why can't they use drones to inspect the power lines? Drones are cheap, they are reliable. So they can use the same. And when we come to the issue you have raised of purchasing power agreements, if I look at the data on how much power is generated in this country, I am almost sure we have generated enough power to run this economy. But a question we are always asking is, why is power so expensive? When I look at my power bill every month, I'm always surprised by how high it is. And I don't run any factory in my house, but I still see power very high. So one of the suspicions and people have raised is the so-called power purchase agreements. Are they written to benefit the producer or the consumer? So I think we need to make all purchasing power agreements public so that the public scrutinize them, see whether they are to the benefit of the country, to the benefit for the consumers. And I'm happy to have MPs here who can make sure that is done. Because at the end of the day, I don't want politicians to be waking up one day and saying that power should go down by 5% or 10%. Why can't we let the market work? If we are producing more power, I would naturally expect the price to be going down. Now we are producing more power, but the price is going up. Why should power be exceptional to the rules of economics? So let the market work so that we have better power prices, and that we are going to put that money elsewhere. Remember, power is an input to very many production processes. So everybody is going to benefit. And I don't know why we make power so mysterious. If hospitals can compete against each other, what is wrong with having another power provider or another company to transmit power or another company to distribute power? So I believe it is a time we demonopolize the power system in this country. And if you remember, by the way, power production is liberalized. We have KenGen, we have IPPs, we have solar and so on. But when it comes to transmission and distribution, there's monopoly. That's the monopoly we need to break.
Okay, Sako, add your voice to the monopoly, and equally, do we have the necessary supporting legal framework in order to get these directives that have been issued in the past by President Uhuru Kenyatta and get them working?
Let me start by agreeing with Professor Exen that demonopolization is really the way to go and must be done yesterday. Under our international experiences on using the same distribution systems for different power companies. And I guess that's not so difficult. You know, you load on your power and you know how much it is, and out there people can decide which company to deal with on the same power line distribution systems. Second thing, yes, the enabling legislation needs to be put in place. That can't be difficult because there's not going to be any new investment, as it were. It's a matter of changing the rights of access, because after all, these power lines have been built over the years mostly with public funds, And so forcing the monopoly companies to surrender space to others can't be done. But let me tell you, there is a chance of mischief there. I have seen in my own constituency in Nambale, down in Busia, that a solar power company that works in communities and distributes power, which had plans to expand in certain areas, suddenly the REREC and KPLC began dropping posts and pretended to set up lines all over the place where this company was going to go to. And when the company retreated to find out what was happening, nothing has happened. They came back and took away their poles. So there is that tendency to resist any kind of competition, but that must be broken in the public interest. I think it will do a lot of good when people sign up for power and they say, I want my power from such and such a supplier. So when they are billed relative to that supplier. And the cost should be the state, we in parliament and the government too, must look at the way those power bills are done. Even just simplifying them, deconstructing them. I mean, I look at it every time, and you find the market, you say, this is the consumption, this is the cost. Then you have fuel levies, then you have foreign exchange, something. There are a lot of elements into it that are completely confounding in a system where our economies are liberalized. That the foreign exchange side is now an open trading issue. It should not be done administratively by a power supply company as they do their charges. My bills are twice the actual consumption cost. What you pay is at least twice the consumption cost, 100% yet again over and above the bill. So I think there is a lot to clean up, and I think we really must lay bare these monopolies and have them face others and face the market.
Well, luckily there's a new tariff which is in effect from January to December, where domestic users are set to pay less, even commercial users as well. So as we finalize on this point, Martins, reforms have been ongoing in the power sector. We definitely saw towards the end of last year the government clamping down on KPLC in one way or the other. Well, what say you about the reforms? Are they getting the intended actions actually happening?
Well, just one area I want to see those reforms effective is a protection of the consumer. Right, Bunyasi rightly said, when you get a bill, you don't know how it is structured. You don't know what you are paying for. Sometimes they say we take the average, like now we had those 2 days blackout. It will be very interesting to see how those 2 days were taken out off the bills of those people who did not have power. So we have a situation here between the consumer and the supplier, where the consumer is so vulnerable on these bills that you know it is not what you used, but it is given to you, and if you don't pay, they can come and cut off the power. So what I would like to see is kind of transparencies in billing system, even if we have those which we have said right, but the billing system so that people are billed correctly and the consumers understand that this is what I use. And that's why I'm championing that prepaid. That prepaid is very good for people if they can enhance that so that you put a coin or you put a token and you know this token is going to run and you can see how it is running. When it is going to be out, you know, you load it again. You know, that kind of system, I mean, that would be good transformation. I hope the reform are also protective to the consumer. That is my pitch, because I see how people are suffering on that line.
Okay, we definitely need to protect the consumer at the end of the day, but a lot more details on some of the issues facing the transmission line right there has been covered on the back page of the Daily Nation, pages 4 and 5 of the Standard. Find out more on that. But let's cross over to the front page of the Daily Nation, all to do with the political developments of the day. Uhuru has invited Azimio members of parliament to election talks, and we expect ODM Chief Raila Odinga, Kalonzo Musyoka, Musalia Mudavadi, Moses Wetangula, and Gideon Moi, that's the One Kenya Alliance principals as well, who have been invited. We expect them perhaps to make their way to State House, and that meeting is set to happen today morning. We have some of the members of parliament. I don't know whether you'll be attending. Let's start from that particular point. Sakwa Bunyasi, you are allied to One Kenya Alliance. Are you attending this particular meeting? What do you expect from it?
Thank you for asking me to answer this question. No, I'll not be attending the meeting. I have functions organized for today. And I got an invitation from one of my colleagues, and he did not state what would be going to State House for. I need to know an agenda. I know it's a great honor to be invited to State House and be the guest of the head of state. But really, given the nature of political goings on, I think one needs to know what you're getting into. You can't navigate through your life with a blindfold on your eyes. And I recall many years ago in the mid-70s, one time then I was an official in a credit union in one of our institutions here. I think it was 1974-5. And we trooped down to Nakuru. We were going to explain to the president the impact of our credit unions, how have we helped our members, and blah, blah. But when we got there, a resolution was read that said, Your Excellency, these people have come here to thank you for the good leadership, and so on and so forth. It was completely unrelated to what it is that we are going to do. And since then, I am extremely wary about trooping in crowds to go and see the head of state without knowing what it is he will be told you have come to do.
Exactly. I'm pretty sure the optics might send a political message, but I'm pretty sure, Martins, you got the invite rather. What is the agenda of this meeting?
So I did get the invite, and I say kudos to Mr. President. He has been working so hard, calling leaders so that he can, when he exits, he can leave a united and productive Kenya. The head of state is, for him to be calling all this meeting, he means it. And he desires that when he leaves the scene, he would like to see a united country. And I want to ask my colleague here that Uhuru is very democratic. Even if you disagree with him, you always give that opportunity to, stand respectfully, say what you think should be happening. But in politics, we always say, showing up is 80% success. If you don't know what is going on, just cancel those things, let's go, and see what is there. Because what is trying to be brewed here is how best can we work together without repeating what we have seen in the past elections. That's why my party leader called it Azimio la Umoja. How can we, even if we disagree, can agree on issues that can put this country safe? Even if I don't have specific agenda, I have seen the effort of the president, what he does. He has met those leaders 3-4 times, just trying to find the better pathway of transiting into another term without bloodshed. So I think it's around that. I'm ready to go, and I hope my colleague here will change his mind. Let's go and see what the head of state have to say.
Okay. Let's take a short break as perhaps you convince him to join you later on. As we come back, I'll get the thoughts of Exen Iraqi in terms of the president's succession, managing his succession rather, and whether he will be more involved going forward, or whether this is the first hint that he'll be more involved in terms of managing his succession. More details in terms of the deliberations, in terms of news-making headlines after this break. Stay with Morning Prime.